Hola, Lorenzo.
Hola.
Hola, Lorenzo.
Cristina, tú también estás en Berlín, ¿no?
Hola.
Hola, Lorenzo. Sí, yo estoy en Berlín.
Anda. Cristina, tú también estás en Berlín, ¿no?
Hola.
Lorenzo. Sí, yo estoy en Berlín.
Anda. Cristina, tú también estás en Berlín, ¿no?
Hola.
Lorenzo. Sí, yo estoy en Berlín.
There is a loop.
Anda.
Sí, hay un loop.
Sí, yo estoy en Berlín.
There is a loop.
Anda.
Sí, hay un loop.
Hi to everyone. Welcome to this second day of the first session of Cuba. I don't know if you are all ready, but we are already streaming. I think there is some people that they need to arrive still, but I think we are gonna start since the audience on the other side, I think they are expecting us. So I want to welcome all of you to the second day of the event. My name is Juan Chacon. I'm from the office Zuloark. Zuloark is a distributed office in different countries in Europe. I'm based in Berlin. I'm also part of the Inteligentes Colectivas network since its creation, 2010. And then I want to, today, the day is going to be, like we are going to transfer from the day of yesterday, that it was more like the general context of Inteligentes Colectivas, like the first encounter with all the partners and supporters that we are starting this project together. And today we are moving to the local specific context of Cuba. So the whole content of the day is going to be related to that. But first, like to do this transition, I would love to talk about like how Inteligentes Colectivas is actually two things, or is trying to achieve two things. First of all, like the Inteligentes Colectivas is a network, as we could say yesterday, is a network who everybody who is interested and have like a common interest can come together to co-create and co-research a local specific place they are interested with. This accessibility is done through a website. So in the case of Cuba, we are launching, is still in development, cuba.inteligenciascolectivas.org. I will be posting the link later, and you can see it in the YouTube link. So this website, we are going to try in the next weeks, like through all the partners, to create like this catalog of evidences, like similar to the examples that we saw yesterday, but also a glossary. How are the terms that we are specifically using in this project in the context of Cuba? A map that connects all this evidence that they are not individual examples, but also they can be connected and we can understand the layers of how our cities or territories are working. And also a repository that will be like all the information that the people involved in the project will be sharing with each other through a specific part of the website. And of course, all the partners and all the people inside the project, they will have a profile and they will have a website where we will be able to see their contributions. This is the first part of Inteligentes Colectivas that is also applying to Cuba. And the second part that is important that we understand, that was also very detailed yesterday by Juanito from Zoohaus, is that Inteligentes Colectivas is a methodology that helps us to co-research and co-create our territories, the territories that we inhabit. So today, with these two big ideas, like our network in Cuba and surroundings, because we are working like transnational, and also this methodology, like we are going to go inside the Cuban context with some invitees. So the first part of the day will be like 30 minutes, where Lorenzo García-Andrade from Zoohaus will present some previous research done last year in a 10 days trip in the city of HAVANNA in collaboration with CUJAE and also with La Fábrica, with Guillén, and some topics and some specific examples of things that are happening in HAVANNA that can kick off like a conversation. And afterwards, we will have like a panel with people that they were already yesterday, with Joiselen, with Fernando Martirena Cordoves from Infraestudio, from Robertico Ramos, is a designer, a Cuban designer, Michael Sánchez Torres from the Proyecto Akokán, or Ana Laura Escalona from Proyecto Akokán as well, and will be moderated by Guillén. And then after this conversation, we will open the conversation to the rest of the partners and also to the audience through the chat in YouTube. And this last part will be half an hour, moderated by Cristina Serifi and Guillén Barrera. So I want to thank like everybody participated in this event and in this project, like Zoohaus, like the partners, Zoohaus, TU Berlin, the Freie Universität, the CUJAE and FAC. I want also to thank like the partners like the Berliner University Alliance, the Embassy of Spain, the Proyecto Click, that they are like supporting and funding these first steps of the project. And of course, like to the technical part, like Peter and Rodrigo from both sides of the Atlantic. And I want to give the voice to Lorenzo now with two questions that they were in the air yesterday. And I think it's nice that we remind them all together for the discussion afterwards. Like one of the questions from the audience was like how to maintain local and international networks and how to stay connected and continue building knowledge. That is something that's very relevant for us. And the other is like, in order to understand the collective intelligence in Cuba, we will carry out some field analysis so that that it can be appreciated how citizens approach creative solutions to daily problems, and under what criteria would one area or another be studied. So this is important for our panelists. Nevertheless, I'm going to give the voice to Lorenzo, and then I hope everybody enjoys this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan, and thank you everyone else again, Guille and Peter, for holding this infrastructure, holding the infrastructure of the whole encounter. Nothing before going, I think, into I had thought that would be a bit interesting was going a step back to the trip we did for 10 days, which we called Phase 0 or Phase 1, like a year ago. And it's to go back one more year, which is when we were doing this project, studying, investigating. It was for an artistic approach. We were doing an investigation around barber shops in Cuba as social condensers. I mentioned it yesterday briefly. And well, the project was from the Ministry of Culture in Spain and in collaboration with Rode Quintero, a barber from Cuba, and Oscar Mendia as well. And the thing with this project was trying to get like learnings of the broader Cuban society, economy, and social functioning through a specific space. You know, obviously the learnings are marginal and limited, but we did still find that there were a lot of things that were able to be condensed through that. So 2 years ago we went there, I don't know if around 18 or 20 days, and throughout those days we visited, I don't know, like about 50 or 60 barber shops, and we made different agents there. And we started to gather like an archive of sound, of materials, of interviews. And then throughout our time there, we weren't very clear on how we were going to formalize the project. But after all these visits and seeing and accumulating all this content and then reviewing it while we were there, we decided that the most strict way to be able to transfer the knowledge we felt we were acquiring or being exposed to was through the transfer of the experience we were having. So in that sense, that's how the project formalized. Our intention was to transfer the experience we were having in that trip to a specific context where it was going to be presented, where it was in Madrid. So to that, in the process of formalization, we took a hyper realistic approach. So that is, we tried to in some way replicate a space from Havana, but in Madrid. And let's not there's a very slight but important difference, that we were not trying to open a Cuban barber shop or restaurant in Madrid. What we were trying to do was to take a piece of Havana and insert it in Madrid, and that implied a very rigorous, hyper realistic approach, which I will get into now. So the project had several layers. On one side, it had a layer of architecture. When we got to Madrid, we had to construct a whole space, which included all the legal certificates and documentations that you would need to open a barber shop restaurant in a house in Havana. We had to do the adaptation of plugs. We induced humidity in the space. We brought, 50 kilograms of objects and materials from there. We changed the lights. We had to build tables, the whole señalétic and everything. We painted it, and then we had that, and then it happened in a house in Madrid, which is also an art space called El Cuarto Invitados, and that's where we sort of run the activity. At the same time, we did choose barber shops for several reasons. On one side, they happen in a house, so it implies the household. At the same time, it implies a form of income, and they're one of the most disseminated businesses in Cuba are barber shops. So we were looking at a place which is very ubiquitous. There are many. To the point that when the opening of the economic opening that took place in 2010, it was barber shops that were chosen as the business in which to first implement this thing. At the same time, barber shops have a very distinct social character and are very frequently used. So in this sense, we were opening, we could say we were for one day. It took place one day, the 27th of December, which is the day of the barbers in Cuba, in Madrid. So we opened a business, and we realized in the process that just having a barber shop while we had more free space wouldn't be enough. So we opened as well a restaurant, and we collaborated with a person. So throughout an entire day, people could come. They would have to buy in Cuban pesos. If they were foreigners, they would pay a different price. And they could come and cut their hair. They could come and have lunch. They could come. So it was also very interesting how throughout the day everything went evolving. It was it would seem when you were there that you were really, it was very well constructed, as if you were in another place. And apart from this more economic layer, you had then this more performative layer, which in collaboration with Rode and Oscarito, we managed to have it. We were the persons that were managing the place. Throughout the day, they were the owners of the place, and with whom we imagined both experts, one in bar and restaurant hosting, and the other one in barbershop, in barbershop, and as well in a more academic and social way. So they were holding out the place, and then when people would come throughout the day, you would have there was a whole communication project in it, which we did a whole newspaper as if it was from the day there. And in that newspaper, we were inserting actual stories from original Cuban newspapers that had a lot to do with the different topics we were saying. There was a TV running with a whole program as if it was on a normal day. The whole imagery, the whole curation of objects. So it was a very exhaustive. It was a very exhaustive project. But I think that in that transfer from one place to another, we were able to put forth some conclusions and observations which I think are like very colindent to the project of Inteligencias Colectivas we were ourselves in. On one way, we were able to observe like an economic and historical structure of how a society is conformed. Like there were other ways of living, like the economy. Like a sort of unlearned capitalism, whereby throughout the resources you have, you also adapt the skills you develop in order to implement them and to earn a living. This whole topic of degrowth is very visible there through the reuse of materials, through the fight of programmed obsolescence, also the way that spaces are used, like spaces of learning and professionalization, how they're different in one context or another became very visible. And even the more personal approach to spaces, which as we find in, for example, Madrid, they're being continuously homogenized in these spaces, which were still homes and at the same time more personal businesses. You still had you had more of what less divided all these cross paths of society. So these places were political, they were religious, they were social, and they were sort of governed in a less reglementary way. They had their own schedules, their own forms. So their forms of communications vary in according to the specifics. So they're almost all like site-specific running projects, and so that is very related in a personal level to the persons running it. At the same time, by doing this project, we were also we were inserting ourselves in this legal question of how spaces are allowed to be used in determined places, right? For example, in Madrid, you're not allowed to sell food on the street. You can't do ambulant vending, but in Cuba, for example, you can, or in a home in Spain, to change the license from one urban space to another, whether it's commercial or workshop or a shelter. It's a very complicated process. So you don't have this over regulation, for example, in Cuba, and this opens different possibilities in the ways the decisions you can take over your own personal space, the decisions you can take collectively over the shared public space. But at the same time, it also overall it really determines how a city and its citizens are circulating and making use of it. So that was very interesting to see how these over-regulatory things, and I won't go much deeper into it, but the complexities of and the ups and downs that each of the situations offers. So mainly a conclusion of it was that there's different ways of being organized as a society, and in a more continuously homogenized planet, Cuba in this sense, I think, does stand out, that it has particularities which were mentioned yesterday. And I think there are learnings to be extracted, and every place has its good and bad sides, to call it in a simple way. But I do think that it's a place where there's a lot to be learned, simply because of the way it's functioned and the way it's happening, to today. So different forms of consumption, different forms of use of materials, different forms of, as Oroza calls, the socialization of technology, whereby, and which Juanito mentioned yesterday with the example of the iPhone, it's a very different sort of relationship with materials, of opening, of dissecting it, of converting a part of a thing, an opportunity in another place. So all these movements, I think, are topics that came out through it, and I think that also shaped a lot the way in which we started to look at the project of Inteligencias Colectivas there. And that's sort of, as was mentioned yesterday with Guyen, when the conversation started, and then the project happened, and then a year later, with the support of the Spanish embassy there and Acción Cultural here, we were able to go back again. And in that sense, there were three main goals we had for that trip. One was identifying, with the methodology we had done and with the dialogues we were having with Guyen, there was three main goals. Sort of this trip was a bit to lay the foundations to continue working. So one was the topics of interest, Another one was like agents of interest, and the other ones were spaces that could be relevant to the investigation in different aspects. So in this sense, like after living there, because there's a lot of topics you could go into. I tried to give a bit of a panorama with the barbershop project, but I mean, you do have to start somewhere, and we did have the intention of centralizing certain topics with the desire of exploring this in more depth, with the possibility of also opening them more afterwards. So in this sense, we tried to identify 4 topics which were broad enough but still narrow enough to be able to work with them. So the first topic was like habitability, and by habitability we were looking at sort of the way people are using space in the city. So at both the domestic level, with the whole like vertical ampliations that people do in their homes there, or the vertical ampliations, which also translates to the use of public space. So for example, you have people, or some barbershops we saw happened at the sidewalk of the house. So it's a way that suddenly the public space is being incorporated to a public activity. At the same time, it's used for social gatherings, for different encounters, for social gatherings, for political purposes, for sports. There's a lot of different use that the city is given in Havana, and that's sort of what we were trying. One of the topics we want to be looking at. At the same time, in all these processes, of course, materials are happening, are being used, and these relationships, of course, are very, very relevant to it. Then the second topic we have is mobility, and I would say mobility and like circulation. Not mobility exclusively. Transport on itself is quite a big topic in the island. Havana is a very spread, and particularly in Havana, it's a very spread out city, and there's normally a need to cover quite large distances to go from one point to another. So in this sense, with mobility, we are looking at transport in the most strict sense of the word. So like transport vehicles, whether it's cycling, cars, but also forms of transport, right? Like how car sharing happens, how different vehicles are intervened to serve different purposes, how also a form of transport can become also a selling stand. So this brings us as well to like the circulation of consumer goods and materials, which for the embargo and different reasons have not always been easy. So this sort of circulation of materials there happens in a way that I think differs to different contexts, and it definitely differs to current European societies and the way. But at the same time, with mobility, we're also looking at the circulation of information. So now there is a greater access to internet there, but at the same time, el paquete, which is a form of accessing like information from the internet, whereby you take a terabyte of information, you go to a center and you take it, and that's a way like weekly how information was being circulated in a very fast way throughout the entire island. So when thinking of mobility and circulation, we're looking at transport as such, but also looking at how materials move around Cuba, specifically Havana, but also how information is distributed and accessed to in it. And then the third topic we're looking at is resilience, or resilience as an understanding as a sort of a strategies of durability, like how different measures, homes, industries take their different decisions to increase their durability because of the lack of materials there are, of the lack of accessible resources, and how these different strategies permit persistence. So like also very related to this is maintenance, which is a very important part of life there, which is maintaining, whether it comes to cars, because there's no access anymore to spare, which is the typical example. There's no longer like access to spare parts because there are American cars from prior to the revolution, how suddenly these have been completely modified and intervened in order to be able to be in continued use. And this applies as well to like Uriga, which is like a washing machine that had a fan from the Soviet Union, and the fan of the machine has been used in very different contexts, whether it's in like batidoras, sorry, I don't know how you say, like in batidoras or different applications. And there's a whole like movement of pieces and spare parts that are moving from one side to another to sustain the necessary activities that those materials support, right? And then finally, which I think I'm with Vicente will be one of the upcoming sessions. So like the emergency, from my point of view, like you can look at it like is Cuba in a constant state of emergency, right? Because of the embargo and the hardships that has endured. And the embargo in the last decades has been very strongly economically, and it's been material and immaterial in the sense that from the island, economic transactions necessary to purchase goods for the islands have been frozen because they were going through channels where the United States has access to block it. And this applied to all sorts of technology, consumer, industrial goods. So it's debatable. I was speaking earlier to Juanito, it's debatable whether this could be considered a situation of constant emergency, which I think it's a topic that's arguable, but I leave it there. And then, of course, you do have like the more referred to emergencies like hurricanes, which Cuba, for example, has a very, very good preventive like system and mobilization in the sense of evacuating communities at very fast times, doing it in an ordered way, in a very strategic ways to avoid, for example, human casualties during these natural disasters. And then, of course, you have then these are more structural, like emergencies we're talking about. But then at the same time, of course, there are personal and industrial and more specific emergencies that attend to other people. And I think that that studying this form of responses, of resolving, of solution, more if resilience is more related to durability, emergency is more focused on like on the avoidance of crisis, and impeding their impact. So these are sort of the 4 block of topics which we're going to be looking at, and which throughout the 3 symposiums we will be working at with different specialists, artists, urbanists, historians, which will be participating. And at the same time, we will be producing content for the website, written, video, and stuff with different collaborations in order for this virtual space to be alive, so we can all the group continue adding content, but also have some external perspectives to put to add from their specialties, right? Then this sort of comes out from the phase 1 as the topics of interest, but then we also look in the trip at the spaces of interest, So what sort of spaces would we be looking at when going back, what we thought were relevant? And at the same time, we saw like places of distribution, so places like markets, ports, more of production, like industries. But at the same time, personal workshops, car maintenance places, and different like private businesses which are working specifically on fixing fish tanks, for example, or which are fixing cars. So this, but at the same time, also more educational level. We were like like CUJAE and La Fac, which of course we have mentioned, which are spaces that serve also for the distribution of contents, but also for like educational and pedagogical purposes. Then more like also more cultural projects like El Corredor de Línea, which is more like an emerging cultural project which is under development, taking place in the neighborhood of Vedado, and still open to see what's going to happen with that. So we sort of did whole localization of different spaces sort of around these places where we could distribute contents we were producing, places we could investigate where we were investigating, places where we could access students and professionals from this that were working in the same fields as ours, and workshops. And then finally, the third thing we want to do, which I think it's the agents of interest, right? So, which I think is sort of, that sums it up with all of us that were meeting here. So when we went there, we did have to do a lot of perhaps less fun, but more less fun, but also fundamental, which was build the human network of persons that were interested, that were looking at these topics, and that were willing to engage in a project like this. So on whether we visited the Goethe Institute, the Spanish Embassy, La FAC, La CUJAE, we had pending a visit to like the office of the Historiador. Then we also visited like independent architecture studios, Infraestudio, for example. So we were also like sort of trying to get a brief panoramic, because obviously 10 days allows you to go in depth to what you can go in depth. But I mean, the idea was sort of to build this network of interested, which I think is sort of derived into where we're now, into this conversation where we're all in. So yeah, the first trip was like, at the end, was a bit of a scheme through these three things. Obviously, like the depth you can get to, but thankfully we had Guyen there, who was very good guide in the time there. And well, these were the three things we laid out there. And then the next steps coming up, which derived from there, and which was what we mentioned briefly yesterday, was the workshop and the mapping. So that is to go in there, working with students, to start feeding the virtual space with the content, and start, building that archive of collective intelligences, and mapping out as well the human network behind it. And then, of course, there's this virtual space which we've mentioned, and all the collaborations that I mentioned earlier that are going to be happening and taking place. I don't know if this is a bit of a very broad and quick summary of what it was. I don't know if anyone wants to ask any particular question or make any particular appointment of anything I have said.
I want to say only one thing that is only technical. I think like there were some trouble like with the presentation in some spots, so we are going to upload the PDF in order that is available for everyone to understand the topics, and they will be also uploaded in the website or in the platform that we are creating. But we will send it to all of you and then put it online in order that it's available from later after the thing, in order that you can go through.
Yes.
I have one question about the how much improvisation is it when you went to Cuba, and how much preparation? Was it like, you need to prepare, but on the other hand, you need not to be too much prepared, so just you have to look for it and hunt it, and maybe. So it's a bit of an improvisation versus a plan. What's the balance between the two?
I think that, I think it depends on, like in everywhere, it depends what you go to do, what you go to do. If you're going to go to study grass, you go there and you sit down on the grass, so it depends in how much, like in the amount of territory you want to cover, the persons that you're implying, and that's sort of for this specific case. I do think that, of course, there's a plan, and I think that it was very, I don't know, Guyen was very supportive in building this plan. But I also think that because of for different questions, you do have to go with certain flexibility. And I also think that flexibility, well, in terms of transport, suddenly if you're displacing yourself from one place to another, maybe a problem arises, or the weather, or different elements can bring. So I do think you do need to have a plan, and I think having a plan is great as a general structure. And I also think that it's a place which, for this specific broad sort of field that we're looking at, that you also do need to have flexibility, because at the same time you may be headed to something, but you may come across something that guides you to another direction, and that brings you to determine learnings and contexts or whatnot that may be maybe of greater interest. So I do think always with a plan, but at the same time I do also think that you do need to have some flexibility, because it's so layered the amount of information there, but that flexibility, I think, allows for a better work to be done, but obviously with a general plan. And I think that, like, I don't know, with Guyen, with Joiselen, which I haven't met in person, but I'm sure that with a general plan as well, so people can organize their time, the students know when they have to be somewhere, but at the same time, you do need to have, I think, a leeway to be able to, hey, if tomorrow we were going to go see this place, maybe today we were here working and we decide that we haven't been able to cover everything, so maybe we decide to come and continue working on this, because otherwise we leave and we feel that our job has been a bit unfinished. So I do think that it's a place that calls for flexibility, but I'm always in favor of a plan.
So the German plan and the Cuban flexibility, I think it sounds like a good mix.
Yeah, sort of that. I think the German plan with the local flexibility.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else has something else to add, or if you prefer we continue adding. Guyen, I don't know if you feel I've missed something or you would like to add.
I would say, like, because we are gonna go with Guyen now, like, and then he can do like also an introduction. I don't know, like, from the side from the university or Freie Universität, Professor Foss, or I don't know, Lorena or Ruben want to comment or ask something.
I can go for it. Well, basically, I mean, thanks so much, first of all, to all the people that has been working in organizing these meetings and these sessions. And also it's incredible to see how we are coordinating this through different institutions, but also with people in Cuba. I'm obviously excited to go to there and see in the field how these inteligencias colectivas are happening. I just started to remember some of my field work in the side of disaster research and disaster impacts in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I had a question that I don't know if I can make it now, or but it was related to this materiality of these collective intelligences. And this would be for the people of Zoohaus. Lorenzo or Juanito maybe can address it. Are you collecting also other collective intelligences that are not physical, they are not material? I don't know if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. And that's why, like, for example, when we were like, when I was mentioning, for example, like the distribution of information, I don't know if you can consider that I don't know if you can consider that material, but that circulation, we consider it like more as a digital form of content, you know, and how it's circulated does involve certain material channels, but it does. And then at the same time, with another branch of Inteligencias Colectivas, we're working with Yaumara, which is a colleague that lives in Madrid, and she used to form part of El Conjunto Folclórico Nacional from there. She's a dancer and artist. And so we are working and looking at specifically at like the forms of oral transmission, you know, how all those learnings have been passed from generations to generations, and how they are transferred in a way that's non-material. Actually, we're doing an experimental project of seeing how you could teach, for example, someone to dance rumba through written form. So we are looking at transfers of information and through orality or through practice or other forms like that, and how that is happening. But yeah, we are like looking at non-material, which are not maybe necessarily so evident always, but they do happen, especially in more traditional ambits, and therefore the transfer of information that usually implies other channels than physically evident ones.
To add on what Lorenzo was saying, when we were there, and I think Guyen or Joiselen will be able to talk about this more into detail, but we got to know this. There's different WhatsApp groups because of the scarcity that you can find in Cuba with different things that serve as a way of sharing those kind of materials. And they're not materials in the sense that they're things to build, but the example that I really enjoyed getting to know was a WhatsApp group to share medicine. So for instance, because of the scarcity, maybe you can't get the medicine you need because they don't sell it anymore. There's this WhatsApp group where you can ask other people, hey, I need ibuprofen or I need whatever medicine. And someone in that WhatsApp group might tell you, I know someone that has, I'll put you in contact with that person. Or maybe some person in the group has some, and they will share those resources between each other. So there's this specific WhatsApp group called Medicine in La Habana, or any other different group. So it's really interesting how people are getting connected through the digital technologies now to share resources in a moment where there's scarcity of a specific thing. So maybe, or at least from my point of view, that is a way Inteligencias Colectivas exists in a digital way, not only in a physical way. I don't know if this is an answer, but I think it's interesting because it's talking about how people get organized and get connected and so on in a way where this collective knowledge is shared.
I would also like to add something. I did like very much the question from Professor Van Rijs about how much improvisation and how much we have to have a plan and how you clear it. Lorenzo was very nice. We are now with Lorena working with our 15 students in the unit in the TU, and we are doing a kind of very deep research, and actually we are not yet there in about intelligence or about collectiveness. So we are researching a lot about what we are a technical university, and our students, they already have so many years of training, so to say, that they already have a plan for what they think about. So we are researching a lot about architecture and different definitions like clima architecture, or vernacular architecture, or local architecture, or ecological, or massive, etc. So we are like working now to define and to make clear. So we are having like preparing ourselves to landing there, and kind of this thing of for us, I think will be like a lot of improvisation there. But I'm also very very amazed about the idea that we will arrive there with a precise way of looking that actually is not the same like the Zoohaus, and we will start to find in collectiveness in places that maybe for you is like, hey guys, but this is not collective enough. Or we will start to look for intelligence places that that for you is like, no, but this. And I'm very curious and looking forward to this point when we all there in Cuba start to work together, improvise together, and start to talk about, but guys, this is too much. This is too big or too small, and this is too material. This, I think, will be a very, very interesting point, a very moment in our study.
Yes, thank you, Ruben. I think like only like, because since yesterday, like it's important that we understand that Inteligencias Colectivas is a network, and Zoohaus is like only the initiator, but there are more than 8 individuals and institutions that they are developing this methodology, and every time there is a new network, it defines the concepts and it defines what means collective intelligence. So what is interesting from this specific case of Cuba, that there are like institutions and individuals from 3 different countries that they will be thinking what is inteligencias colectivas in Cuba. So I think your perspective is not, so there is never like this kind of like what you are thinking is right and what we are thinking is wrong, or the other way around. Like it's turned more like a bidirectional process, that there is not about like what is good or what is bad. It's more like how we all together build a context and put together all the cards in order to create like a very specific research and process, something like this. I would love, like, I don't know like if there's anything more to say. I'm more like trying to keep the schedule on time. So now I want to thank Professor Foss and Professor Van Rijks to be here today with us. And I think like that you need to leave a little bit early, but it's nice, like we give pass to CUJAE, that is going to moderate this table. You're going to know some actors, like the first minutes that you are going to be with us, like that they are going to be also when we travel there, and maybe we can meet more deep. But now you have the opportunity to hear them talking for the first time, and then start the discussion about Cuba. So CUJAE, whenever you want, if you want to start the table, I think thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you very much, Chacon. Good morning, everyone here in the Embassy and the Faculty of Architecture. Good afternoon, everyone in Berlin. So we're going to start our roundtable to talk about HAVANNA. Normally, this kind of roundtable is with academics, professors, but in this case, we want to invite different kinds of exercises that is working in the city. For that reason, we invite in the first place to an academic, Professor Joiselen Cazanave, PhD. Dr. Cazanave is also a member of the NOLE project. He's invited here to explain what is doing NOLE project in collaboration with the state of London and other institutions here in Cuba.
CUJAE, sorry, there is something with the micro that from the computer we cannot hear anything. I'm sorry I don't know if it's off. No. Yo sí, pero muy distante.
Hola, yo. ¿Y ahora?
No, you are using the microphone from the computer and not the other microphone. Maybe it's a setting on the call.
You hear me now? No, okay.
No, I have the feeling that you in Google Meet you're figuring the microphone of the computer instead of the external microphone.
Wait.
No. We can continue the discussion until you, I don't know, Lorenzo, if you want to answer some questions that we were addressing before.
Yeah, what were the last question? Sorry.
There were these 2 questions, like if it's physical, like inteligencias colectivas, or these evidences, they can be other ways than physical, that you already answered. And the last one were related to how the topic and the new perspectives come into the project. Like Roberto was saying, like they are exploring their own way.
Yeah, well, to continue in line of what you were saying, like I think that that there is that when you build different networks of people with different like approaches, you do find that this collective intelligence can take different forms really when materializing it. In that sense, I think for me, working with the Ahumada is being very particular in that sense, because you're more than a collective intelligence or something. You're talking about more immaterial learnings and how those are transferred throughout time and how they get modified on the way. So suddenly we're working with someone related with dance and music, and so I also think that when you come from different not only fields but places, context, and I don't know, I think it's also a matter of sensibilities, which different sensibilities I think will place their eyes or be naturally more inclined towards different aspects, points, in forms of looking. So I don't know, I also think that the exchange between the students of La CUJAE with the students coming from Berlin, I also think it's going to be very rich in that sense, how from abroad maybe, and it happens to all of us, like you live somewhere and you get used to something that it becomes sort of invisible, and then someone comes from abroad and they tell you, hey, and then they shed light in another way of looking at the places where you're living. So I don't know, I think that everything is part of a very good, and I think that's why the idea of making it a bilateral exchange was fundamental like for the project, because I think that there's not only like a disciplinary, in this case architecture approach, but also a very subjective approach from your relationship with the territory you're visiting or a territory you inhabit. So I don't know, I think that it's overall that it depends when you're working on that, it's endless, like you can be looking at different things and working with different persons and go through completely different paths. But I also think the diversity, even I'm not an architect, I studied political science and history, and I don't know, I also feel that the different disciplines and the different profiles of the group enriches especially the scope and the breadth we want to give to the project.
Yeah. Again, to add a bit on what Lorenzo was saying, I think what is interesting of the project or what we think of inteligencias colectivas is something that I was mentioning yesterday that has to do with how the project is shifting or is growing through the interaction with other agents. So the perspective of what inteligencias colectivas is in a particular place might change, not because what the core values or the core ideas of inteligencias colectivas are, but because in that specific place, what is interesting is something specific that is different than in another situation. I think that the videos I shared yesterday from Ernesto Rosa might be pretty enlightening towards what we think inteligencias colectivas can be in La Habana. He's been developing all these theories, why not call them like that have to do with many of the things that intelligentsia has been interested in since the beginning. But probably through the interaction with TU and CUJAE and so on, the interest or maybe will shift or will grow or will transform itself definitely. And we think that is part of the conversation. When I was mentioning yesterday that design is good to be used, but is also good to be thought about, is really important, because inteligencias colectivas is about discussing what design is in the reality we encounter in that specific moment. So for instance, in La Habana, we will be discussing of what design is in that specific context, how it's made, what different agents are involved. As Lorenzo was explaining before, how materials are moved from one place to another to be able to be used, how they are shifted from one use to another one, and so on. So we think the conversation of what inteligencias colectivas might be, as Ruben was saying, is part of the interest of the project. So it's about designing, and as I was explaining yesterday, co-designing, but is also a big part of thinking or co-thinking, as we were suggesting yesterday. So it'll be a process where we have discussions on what is interesting and why something is interesting from the perspective of inteligencias colectivas. And hopefully it will broaden the way we think or we see what inteligencias colectivas might be in the future. That is how the project has come about until now. And hopefully it will continue growing because of that. I think that's one of the main ideas of the project. So what Ruben was suggesting is precisely one of the most important things regarding the project. I don't know if they fixed the problems, the technical problems in, not yet? Okay.
Guille? No, it's not working.
Okay, so
Maybe you need to come closer to the computer or something like this with your mask. I don't know, like in order that we are able to hear to all of you, or you disconnect the call and then enter again, because maybe it's a problem of the configuration.
¿Me escuchan? ¿Me escuchan?
Sí.
¿Me escuchan?
Ahora sí.
Ahora sí, ok, perfecto.
Pero a lo mejor está cerca del ordenador o es el micrófono.
A lo mejor es que está cerca. ¿Tú me escuchas a mí, Chacon?
Perfecto.
Ok, perfecto, muy bien. We were preparing other set. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Sorry for these technical issues, but it's okay. So thanks, Chacon and Lorenzo, for the first presentations and for this round of questions. So now we're going to start our roundtable about to talk about Havana. In the regular way, this kind of table used to be just with academic, but we want to make a different approach with invited different exercises that is taking places in the city those days. We invited Professor Joiselen Cazanave, who is a PhD and professor of the Faculty of Architecture. But here we invite her as a member of the No Project, a collaboration project with the UCL of London and other Cuban institutions to think about the future of the city in different topics. We also invited Robertico Ramos Mori, who is a designer, tattoo designer, and is a member and founder of the La Marka Bodyart gallery, an interesting entrepreneur, responsible entrepreneur business who is located in the historical center. I have an interesting work with the community in this area. We also invited Ana Laura Escalona and Michelle Sánchez from Akokán project. Michelle is the coordinator of the project, and Ana Laura is collaborator of the same project. They're gonna to explain what they be doing in those years. Finally, we invite Fernando Martirena, who is an architect and founder of the Infraestudio. The idea of this roundtable is to talk about Havana, challenge, but also the potentiality that we have in the city from this different approach to understand how, with a different perspective, we are thinking and how we understand Havana. I want to invite you in 1 minute to present what you've been doing this year. The first moment, I want to invite Professor Cazanave to explain what is No Project and what you'll be doing this year.
Hello, everyone, and nice to see you again today. To explain No Project is too long, maybe. Then I want to share some general ideas about this challenge and potentiality from the No Project. No is a project that is held in UCL London within the DPU, and where is participating 8 countries from the south. And then Havana is one of the cities where we were working. I'm one of the partnership city within the project, partner city in Havana. because it's a collaboration between UCL and, in this case, CUJAE and other institutions within the city. And this is part of the projects that are sharing by the research and action group, urban research and action group in the Faculty of Architecture. And as the name say, it's a group that is not only working on the research about the city, but also about the actions in order to know, or in order to feed our research about the different urban situations in the city and how to do with that. And this is the main idea of our group. Work with the communities, work with the people, feed our work from the everyday life. One of the lines we develop within the group is the transdisciplinary line, in order to implement some tools and methods in general that allows us to integrate not only professional knowledge or discipline or knowledge from disciplines, but knowledge from the everyday life, knowledge from the communities, knowledge from the people who is trying to fit their needs in the everyday life. And this is one of the points that I think NO and our research group have in common with this collective intelligence. And in this case, NO is working in 4 urban situations. Alamar, that is a kind of new town in the east part of the city. The Bay, the area of the Bay, that is so around the Bay, all the territories are around the Bay. Centro Havana, especially Los Sitios, that is a central place in Havana that maybe some of you are walking. And the last case is Plaza de la Revolución, because it's one of the most ancient places in the city, and we want to work with elderly people. And in this case, we are trying to incorporate these people in general, these communities, in researching how to fit their problems. In this, I think this is one of the challenges we have in Havana, precisely to include the people in the solutions we can do from the architecture and from the urbanisms. The potentialities are exactly in what they do in the everyday life. What are they developing in the everyday life in order to fit their necessities in general, their demands. And we can see this every day. Yesterday with a student, we were discussing after our meeting that Cuba is one of the more resilient places. And during the crisis in the 90s, for example, we implemented some ideas about how to move in the city. And then mobility is one of the items we want to talk about in this Inteligencias Colectiva. And precisely we have this experience using the bicycle and using another means. And maybe the bicycle is not so common now, but we are trying to bring again back to the life. And there are new ideas about how to move materials with 2 wheels and a kind of different bike, or how to move more people than one biking, but 2 in the back of a kind of cyclobus or something. And also we have some experience about how to grow in the city, how to make in urban agriculture. Cuba is one of the most successful places where the urban agriculture were developed in the 90s. And then we can see how to change the places without this urban agriculture inside the cities. Then this is one of the challenges. And another big potentiality to face this challenge is that Cuba have a kind of slow motion urbanism. And that's mean that we are in a state of urbanism that is in the same state in the 60s or in the 70s. And that means we can do a kind of shortcut, a kind of go without see what would be happening in the meantime, with a learning from another experience, from European experience or from the other North experience in the North or even in the South, and then implemented new ideas of how to do things with the collective experiences of the people from the everyday life of them, and then incorporate it to the design of the city, to the design of the buildings, and etc. Then this is a great potentiality we have, and a challenge is how to include the people and then how to face these problems in the city in general, and then how to continue. Okay, I think it's enough, and we can talk a little bit more if you have questions after the panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Cazanave. I want now Fernando Martirena explain from the perspective of architectural studio here in Havana, what is the work with the city.
So, hi everyone. Thanks, Guillen and Inteligencias Colectivas for the invitation. My name is Fernando Martirena. I'm a co-founder of Architecture Studio and Art. That it's an independent practice that basically works for the private sector of Havana. And also we have developed during the last years a series of even research, but also theoretical and artistic speculations about the future of the city and also the actual condition. So I think that would be.
I want to introduce now Ana Laura Escalona and Michelle Sánchez for Akokán Project.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to translate Michelle's word.
Bueno, gracias por la invitación. A ver, coordino un proyecto comunitario que nació como una iniciativa de autogestión en 2016, que su principal objetivo es el desarrollo integral de una comunidad en grandes condiciones de vulnerabilidad.
So he is the coordinator of Akokán's project, which started in 2016, and Akokán was born in Los Pocitos, a needed community in Havana, Marianao, and the main object or the main goal of the project is.
Las primeras líneas de trabajo estaban enfocadas a reconocer el patrimonio cultural como una oportunidad para el desarrollo, partiendo que la experiencia nace de la universidad como un proyecto de extensión.
So at the beginning, the project was focused on revalue all the heritage that Los Pocitos have, and was part of initiative of San Jerónimo's University.
Y actualmente hemos crecido, digamos, a una visión más integral de poder incidir desde lo económico, lo ambiental y lo social en la transformación de una comunidad especial como es Los Pocitos.
And so right now, the project has grown, and we are focused on, sorry, I missed that part. ¿En qué estábamos centrados? ¿Qué querías decirle? ¿En la agricultura?
No, a ver, en lo económico, en lo ambiental y en lo social.
Okay.
La dimensión integral del desarrollo.
Akokán is now focused on an integral vision of the society and is working with the agriculture, with social values and urbanistic. Yeah. Yeah, that's our minute. Ese es nuestro minuto. I think we should stop.
So now Robertico is going to explain what is La Marka and how they operate in the historical center of Havana. I'm going to translate.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Roberto Ramos, soy diseñador y artista visual. Soy el responsable de la parte de cultura del estudio Galería de La Marka, que llevamos 6 años insertados en La Habana Vieja. No somos ninguno de La Habana Vieja, nos insertamos en ese espacio. Y bueno, el objetivo principal que tenía en un inicio era...
My name is Roberto Ramos. I am a designer. I'm a visual artist. We've been operating for 6 years in the historic in Havana. We are not from Havana, but we added there and we started to working.
Y soy responsable de cultura.
And I am the responsible of culture of La Marka.
Nuestro objetivo primero cuando nos hicimos el estudio fue, que sigue siendo como el objetivo principal, es rescatar dentro de las artes visuales cubanas, dentro de la visualidad cubana, el arte corporal, en especial el tatuaje, porque existe una legalidad de la actividad en Cuba, que no es legal todavía.
Our first goal and our main goal, still being our main goal, is create, put in value the corporate art, the body art inside of the visual art in Cuba, and to create a legality for them in the artistic manifestation here.
Y la forma que hemos ido encontrando poco a poco, ha sido estableciendo sinergia con otras disciplinas de las artes visuales y relacionándonos de una manera armónica con la comunidad real del espacio en el que estamos emplazados y una comunidad virtual también que se retroalimenta de todo lo que hacemos en redes sociales, etc.
¿Cuál es lo primero? Y la manera que encontramos. And the way we find to create this goal to get that goal was create connections with the different artistic manifestations, but also with the community that will be operating, and also with the online community, with the presence and activism in the social network.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I want to start with the first question. It's about what is the issues and tensions that you are working with in your regular work with the community. What is that problem that you find and you've been focused on them? I want to start with Akokán.
A ver, estamos hablando de un tipo especial de ciudad que inicialmente nacen como ciudades espontáneas, tiene varias denominaciones, ciudad informal, yeguipón, a ver, que tienen un grupo también de regularidades. A ver.
So we are talking Akokán. It's based on Los Positos, a community that doesn't have legal recognition, and we can find different names for that, like yeguipón, like I don't know how to translate, slum, and well.
Son ciudades o espacios urbanos que generalmente son vistos como marginales, pero más bien me gusta decir que son marginados.
Usually the people who lives there and the community in general live a process of exclusion, and in Spanish we call it marginados. There are people who are marginated.
Hacia afuera de las oportunidades.
Yeah.
Que tradicionalmente estos espacios no son vistos como lugares de crecimiento económico, de inclusión, sino son más bien rechazados, donde no hay políticas públicas, digamos, bien focalizadas en su desarrollo.
Usually people there cannot find economic ways to subsist, to live, and they don't have the same opportunities that people who lives in other part of the city.
Y que, por ejemplo, ahora mismo en el periodo este pandémico que estamos viviendo, se ha enfrentado a problemáticas muy particulares, como es el problema del acceso a la información, el hacinamiento, el acceso al agua, al empleo formal.
For instance, during this time of pandemic, the access to water, to information, to legal and formal work has been tough,
Y el acceso a los alimentos también.
and the access to food, it's hard to find there.
Pero parte de nuestro trabajo es identificar esa gran diversidad de oportunidades que existen en esos espacios, desde lo cultural.
Creo que vamos a llegar ahí después, ¿no?
Ya.
Bueno.
Sí, como oportunidades de desarrollo, ¿no?
But the work of Akokán is find the potentialities and the ways to bring development to the community.
Y que en realidad son una mezcla de muchas identidades de Cuba, porque son comunidades que nacen de la inmigración.
Sí.
Entonces ahí coexisten muchas maneras de ser diferentes, que al final es riqueza.
Another characteristic of the community is that in that same place we can find a lot of different Cuban culture because there are migrations for other province of this country. So that's other issue, like a variety of interest and cultures and way of do things.
Y donde las personas, por sus situaciones críticas de vida, están todo el tiempo innovando, y creando y conectándose para poder llegar a salir adelante, ¿no? Y poder vivir.
So, due to this necessity of these hard conditions, people are all the time innovating and finding new ways to subsist, to live.
Y identificar estas estrategias son
And that's one of the
posibilidades de
things.
desarrollo, ¿no?
And that's one of the things that Akokán seems like a potentiality to find that way of doing, of that innovation that people have. So.
Y donde experiencias como la nuestra de trabajo comunitario en asentamientos de este tipo puede convertirse en un laboratorio para identificar estrategias que sirvan para las más de 100 comunidades, ¿no? que hay en La Habana de este tipo y en Cuba
That's
también.
other goal of Akokán. Akokán wants to be like a platform to systematize that way of work with this type of community, because it's not the only one in the city. It's more than Los Positos. We have several communities with this characteristic.
It's interesting because Akokán is located in Marianao, who is is the municipality who is in the periphery, and they have a really interesting urban fabric because they have this slum, but they have this area is more consolidated with urban fabric, and that's a reality, and that's interesting to talk about the access to work, to food, information, formal jobs that's what we talk. There will be talking, but now in the historical center with the more we can say formal conditions with a lot of more heritage. We're talking about the buildings and more social and cultural project because of the work of the office of the historian. What is we doing? In what was focused La Marka there working with the community?
Pues nosotros estamos insertados en una zona que, aunque es urbana, también tiene unas características hay bastante estratificación de relaciones, inclusive económicas, ¿no? La zona es turística, pero la gente del diario vive a un nivel bastante separado de lo que pasa. Proyectos generalmente del tipo como el de nosotros son de los que vienen, se insertan en el lugar, se capitalizan y se llevan como lo que ganan y se lo llevan y nunca invierten en la zona.
It's interesting because in the area that we are located is a touristic area, but you can find like two phases, like a duality, because there is a tourism, but there are the needs of the community. The project like us, entrepreneurs, normally come here, put the business, and take off the money to take it to other place. That's the normal way.
Nosotros desde el principio sí teníamos claro que, que más que un estudio de tatuajes nos interesaba tener también una galería, un espacio en el que el tatuaje estuviera aislado y pudiera funcionar para sostener todo lo que teníamos como proyecto inicial, que era la galería, y que el espacio fuera abierto en el cual la gente pudiera entrar, salir, estar.
In our case, we had. In our case, we have clear that we want to have a place for the tattoo studio, but also as a gallery, and the place that we can work with the community can go inside, separated these two activities.
Y bueno, como la mayoría somos personas jóvenes insertadas en el... somos bastante, o sea, somos unos personajes bastante típicos que aparecimos en esa zona y sobre todo hemos tenido muy buena acogida con los niños del barrio, son siempre que nos asocian con las cosas que ellos ven en un momento como que están fuera de la zona, son las que asocian con gente. O sea, para ellos es muy raro ver gente que se dedica a dibujar y dibujando, o sea, ganan dinero, ¿no?
It's for the children of the community. It's really weird to see people with tattoo, to see drawing everywhere with the community, and that create like a connection with them that comes to the La Marca to draw and play with us.
Y a partir de esa misma relación o sea, de dibujar y conversar con ellos, uno termina o sea, se terminan conviviendo, se terminan convirtiendo como o sea, son nuestros vecinos, ¿no? Y al final termina, o sea, enredándote en la vida de ellos también y detectando un montón de problemas que tienen, o sea, de formación, de educación, de cosas que a veces que la escuela no puede suplir, o que las mismas madres, porque son mujeres que decidieron parir jóvenes. Bueno, en fin, hay un montón de historias ahí, al final no terminan convirtiéndose, somos todos como los tíos, un montón de chiquillos ahí.
So there is a lot of need the family cannot supply, and we try to create this different environment that we are like the aunt and uncle of the old children of the community.
Y bueno, nuestra disciplina se ha basado sobre todo en crearles, en educarlos en la capacidad de crear cosas con las manos ellos mismos, o sea, que sepan solucionar problemas con las manos, que no se frustren, porque estamos en ahora todos los niños cuando quieren hacer una cosa parece que se frustran muy rápido, cuando están acostumbrados a los programas de televisión que todos hacen 5 minutos y se frustran muy rápido. Entonces somos más de enseñarles que las cosas tienen proceso, que todo tiene solución, que si te rompe el zapato también se puede solucionar, que no es necesariamente todo el tiempo comprar uno nuevo, ¿no? O sea, es una cosa pedagógica, educativa, sobre todo con ellos y con los padres, al punto que a veces los padres vienen a ver a nosotros y decir, habla con él porque a mí no me hace caso. O sea.
We've been focused on the idea of the creativity and more important in the process, because right now the children is really easy that they do not connect with this. It's more fast. People want to see the something done, and we are more focused in how to the process to do things, and also to think when something is broken, like a shoes, you don't have to buy a new one. You can fix it. And sometimes the parent of the child come here and talk to them because we don't hear us.
Ahora estamos, la relación con los adultos siempre tiene que ver a raíz de, o sea, los problemas que siempre tienen es que los niños siempre, o las personas, sus hijos jóvenes, se quieren tatuar y vienen a hablar con nosotros para que se tatúe con nosotros, ya que se van a tatuar, que se tatúen con nosotros. Entonces ellos nos agradecen mucho que nosotros seamos la gente que digamos, no te puedes tatuar porque no tienes la edad, Y el público adolescente sobre todo se nos ha quedado un poco cojo, pero bueno, en eso hemos encontrado, es un público bastante complicado, pero estamos trabajando, nosotros que trabajamos de manera independiente, no tenemos ningún tipo de problema en relacionarnos con instituciones o sea, culturales que existen en La Habana Vieja, que ya están bastante. Entonces estamos trabajando ahora con la gente del centro de adolescente y con ellos estamos pinchando ahí y más o menos vamos detectando, o sea, estamos muy acostumbrados a que o sea, los adolescentes están acostumbrados como le digan lo que hay que hacer, y ese centro está creado más para que ellos generen los proyectos. Estamos ahora haciéndolo como unos tallercitos para que ellos aprendan a soltar, sí, a proponer.
So in the case of the age, in the age of the tattoo, sometimes the parents brings the children to talk with us, and we explain that they don't have the age to make a tattoo, and they understand. We are now working with the teenagers. It is more important to work. So it's important and tough to work with them. In our case, we are independent, but we don't have any problem to work with the institution. We actually collaborate with some cultural institution here in the historical center, and now we are working with the AMAS project, a project for adolescents for teenagers here in the in the historical center and how to work with them in the idea of the create things in the create in the thinkings on the in the process to talk. Yeah, perfect. So now I want to make Professor Cazanave send me a message. We said slum when we were talking about Los Positos. It's not a slum, it's informal settlements because they have a legal reconnected. They don't.
Yeah, it's a kind of precision made of some specialists on that from Belgium and from United Kingdom, and then they are specialists on that, and it's in this case is informal settlement. What it means, because they have a different. It's not like a slum in the south, and it has several legal recognition. They even have physicians. They even have some bodegas. But anyway, it's not important. Just to tell us the same language to the people who are not speaking in Spanish. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Professor Cazanave. So now we see right now the conditions in the some problems in Los Positos. We saw some problems in the historical center, like two different areas of the city. One, Fernando talked us about the experience of the infra, seeing the cities more global. I imagine right now the work that you do with the urban garden to think about other problems of the city from the visions of the Infraestudio.
So from Infraestudio, we don't have and we don't want an academic approach to the problems of the city, and we are more related. That's why we have been more related with our contemporary art. And the art biennials of Havana have been an amazing platform to put on the table these huge problems that have been experienced in Havana. And I can talk about briefly two projects we have done. The first one was in 2015, and it was about exposing the huge deterioration that it's facing the city, because it's been decades of non-repairing the city, but also the absence of the independent architect as a figure, as an important figure in the city. And because basically everything that or 99% of what it's built in the city, it's built by the government, but the government cannot solve the problem by its own. And it's been like that for the last decades. And this absence of this role, this figure, it's really important, because there's a relation between the deterioration of the city and the emptiness of the historical role of the architect. And what we did in this biennial is to make it physical, to make intervene this space to the people to get here and understand the emptiness. So the experience this big void, and also understanding that independent architecture, it's a crucial element to renovate or to rethink the city in a sense. And then in 2019, we were working in some speculations over the city with Alberto Calach and Maria Calach from Mexico, and about how just changing the gardens of Havana, you can change the whole city. So it's a kind of a proposition about the whole green infrastructure and how this can bring not just climatic changes, but all on the city, or sustainability and all these kind of things that everyone talks about, but also really political changes, really aesthetical, but also social changes. And we also had the opportunity, in a sense, to work with the government for this, for some projects in the city, but then none of these projects came out and worked. And the outcome was another installation in the biennial. So in our case, just the fiction, it's the only device we have been using in these years. And we think, in some sense, fiction can change reality by the imagination. So by just imagining what can be done. And also all these kind of events have this capability to achieve this. So I can.
So now I want to finish this roundtable with a question about opportunity. We talk about problems, we talk about what has happened, what is the situations in this different community and in Havana in general. So what is that opportunity that Havana has right now? So I want to start with Professor Cazanave. I know you explained some of them in your introduction presentation, but like in general to point some opportunity that you don't want to pass.
Okay, sorry. Some minutes ago, I didn't realize that it was only the presentation. I thought was also the opportunities and the challenges, and yeah, and I think I talked a little bit about it. I think Havana has a lot of opportunities, and as I said yesterday, you have to focus in the different urban situations we have. As our colleague explained, is one thing what is happening in the informal settlements and what is happening in the center of the city. And even in the center of the city, you can find different things in the main arterias and in the inner core of the different neighborhoods. Then I think one of the main opportunities that the experiences people have from the everyday life, how they fit their needs and how they do things even when they don't know how to do it. And we have a lot of previous experiences from the different crises we have, and I explained it just some minutes ago about it. And another opportunity is to join in and discuss and find solutions from that we can share in the whole city, and we can put in another level of technical issues that can answer this. And this could be a big opportunity and as well a big challenge. And the main opportunity is to have a kind of shortcuts. For example, in mobility, we can throw it out these phases of having sustainable mobility with a big metro or different things, and we could have a city of places and movements at the same time, and then enhance the walkability and at the same time make easier the people to move around the city. And we can do a kind of shortcut, avoiding cars that we don't have for a long time, and avoiding things that can make a big pollution in the city or other things. And we can have a shortcut in another areas and how to make people participate in the discussions of the city and make policies that can involve them, not only asking them how to do it, but asking but involve them when you are doing something. Then this is a kind of shortcut that we can make in the city. And this is our main idea from our research group, and a great thing we can do from the university, because the university have the history of doing in the cities, doing in the country in general since 1960s. Then, so this is my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Cazanave. So now, for close this part of the roundtable, to finish with the main opportunity that you have from all the different perspectives.
Yo creo que una de las principales oportunidades, aparte del reconocimiento, por ejemplo, del patrimonio de identidad, ¿no?, de esos espacios, es poder transitar a una ciudad sostenible, partiendo que son comunidades que tienen una huella ecológica muy baja con respecto a otras. Y eso hace muy factible poder asumir nuevas tecnologías, nuevas maneras de vivir que sean, digamos, viables desde el punto de vista ambiental y social.
Okay.
Por ahí va la cosa.
We should start it with the heritage and value the heritage, but also to find innovative way of create a sustainability society, because we start with knowing that this is a community that have a low help me with this in this translation, please. Una huella baja, a slow food, small print, yeah, footprint, but in the environment. You know, small environmental footprint or something. That's it.
So the Havana had a huge boom, a construction boom from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and then it was suddenly stopped in the 60s. So when you have a construction process that it's stopped in the most saturated or an extreme point, then you have a huge vacuum, a huge silence. And this silence in construction, it's been bad for the city because it has created a great deterioration of the building itself, but also it can create the opportunity of not making the same mistakes that other cities has made in its ambition of modernization itself. So we are in a really peculiar, hyper-specific condition where you can, let's say, start from scratch and then reinvent urban politics, but also you can reinvent a new approach to the city itself. We have this opportunity. If we take it or not, then it comes to another issue. But I think Cuba, in a metaphorical sense, it's a kind of a desert to be populated, because you can do whatever you want, in a sense, because you don't have so many, the weight of the burden of the modernization history in the city. So it's an open plan, in a sense.
Yo creo que la mayor oportunidad que tenemos nosotros es, al estar enclavados en La Habana Vieja, es habernos podido desarrollar en un sistema democrático y horizontal, y ver que eso así funciona ese barrio por problemas que tiene La Habana Vieja, o sea, potenciar ese tipo de relación.
The main opportunity we have is in the democratic and horizontal process we have in Havana, to see that work and potential that process. So now I want to invite Christina, who is with us, to start the to help me with the moderate this last part, and we open to the questions we have in online and also with our students in the Faculty of Architecture of Havana. Hello, Christina. Welcome.
Hello, Guillem. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me also to the second part. I have been listening your presentations from the beginning with Lorenzo, and I am amazed learning, and I want to learn more about Cuba and Havana. Before we start, we have some questions also from the public, but I would like to address a small question also to our public from my side, or a small note. I have been listening also what Professor Cazanave was saying about the resilience that, and Lorenzo also talked about that, how the Cuban society deal with emergencies. And I have somehow the feeling that maybe this is the fact of these human networks and peer-to-peer practices that the society is showing, and I have the feeling that this is the center of the commons. In European cities, we are always trying and talking about the commons, and I have the feeling that in Cuba you realize it in this amazing way, and I have the feeling that I mean, we would need to learn from this. I mean, living in our environments from this side of the Atlantic. And the second point that I would like also to address, it is that I would like you maybe to comment, is these strong bonds that you see, or I was reading about Cuban, that has between the city and the countryside, and this kind of maybe it's because of the embargo that there are higher, they have understood these interdependencies and these interconnections that the urban environments have with the countryside and relating with the products. And yeah, I would like to hear your opinion about this too. Maybe we start with Professor Cazanave.
Sorry, I didn't understand the last part, but you mean about the differences in the urban environment and the rural environment? I don't understand, sorry.
I have the feeling that there is a kind of very deep connection between the cities, the urban centers in Cuba and the countryside regarding the products or the food production and distribution. And maybe this has to do also with the embargo and the scarce of the products, but I would like to hear more on that.
Yes, yes. Okay. So this is not a, I'm not very, I have not a lot of information. I think Cuba is one of the most urbanized countries in the south. We have a lot of countryside with a lot of people. More than 80% of the people live in cities. And there was a huge kind of development around the 60s and 70s in the countryside. And then while Havana didn't grow for a long time, the other cities grow 3 or 4 times what they did before the 1959. Then I think there is a kind of mixed situation in whole the country, but even though we depend on productions from the countryside in a sense, and then it's a problem how to grow different products. Even though the problems with the fuel in the 90s and even now make difficult to bring the food to the cities. And then during the 90s, we developed a kind of urban agriculture inside the cities. And even we are continuously working on that, and there is gardens, productive gardens and other experiences. Maybe a little bit disappearing, but at the same time, is very common. In these pandemic situations, we realize that again, people growing in their own gardens, roofed, terraces, balconies, etc. And but it is not enough in from my point of view. I think we have a lot to do about it. And we have a lot of knowledge we have to apply on that, and at the same time we have a lot of knowledge in the people that can grow in their own houses to incorporate the science and then make it better for everyone. And the other question, I just remember exactly. Sorry, I focused on that, and then I forgot the other one.
This was not as so much as a question, but more as a point, discussing about the disasters and the resilience of the city. I have the feeling that this is because of the human networks and how people have learned to communicate and work with each other. This kind of peer-to-peer practices. That is the center of commons that here in the cities, in Europe, we are like trying to implement.
Yeah, we have a kind of living between commons. we are living between commons in a sense. Then our neighbors can see our kids. when my kids were very, very small, I was really, I was good in they can go to the school alone, and they have a kind of look at them from the community. And this is in this way in all the senses. So the people can talk, the people can share things, the people can ask the neighbor. Anyway, the contemporary world has changed a little bit these practices. Sometimes you can find in the centers of the city, here in Havana, in Vedado, even in old Havana, things that are not this kind of common sharing. I mean, it's different now. Anyway, in the experiences of informal settlements, maybe this is much more important for the people. And this is very good. This is one of the tradition maybe he was talking about, because there the people can talk. We have the experiences in los sitios where the people under an emergency or under an emergency, they can ask the people, come to my house and leave your house because maybe the roof is not that good. Or maybe they can go to a neighbor to sleep with them because it's a big storm or something like that. Then in the poorest areas, maybe there are more shared experiences for the normal life, and we can learn from that, and we can incorporate to our life in general and to our contemporary life. And I think, in a sense, the academia should learn from that in how to develop the communities, how to make collective places, how to make spaces where students can stay and then share the kitchen or the common spaces, or how can we invent a kind of different projects for the cities and making different. And in this case, we have to learn from these communities. We have to learn, even here in Cuba, from these experiences in the different places around the country. I don't know if I can follow your questions.
Thank you. Yes, more than enough. And I have the feeling that these are also this kind of immaterial aspect that it was addressed at the beginning, no, of the presentations of what you can map besides of the material aspect or the design. And for me, this is super amazing. We have some questions from YouTube listeners and then actually Guyen can also address to Akokán to explain their project as well regarding, I think, agriculture. What do you think, Guyen? Should we read them all together?
Thank you, Cristina. Now, to keep with the same line with the first questions, I want to Akokán explain one of the projects they are implementing in this moment is the shared garden, how they are with neighbor creating like the local urban agriculture. They are now creating also like a collaboration with the specialists, but also giving tools and help them.
¿Cuál es la pregunta? A ver, desde Akokán hemos intentado apoyar la producción local de alimentos, digamos, con una meta del autoabastecimiento de diferentes recursos que ahora mismo son escasos o de difícil acceso para este tipo de comunidad por sus altos precios.
Akokán is supporting the local production of food that right now are expensive in the market. So Akokán is supporting.
Y también por la necesidad de poder complementar la dieta, porque estamos hablando de una comunidad que no tiene en su totalidad el acceso a los alimentos subsidiados que se ofrecen, por ejemplo, por la bodega, ¿no?
And also as a way to support the diet of people, because we are talking about, well, I hope, or I don't know if you know about the rational book that we have in Cuba, the system. We have a rational book where people can buy very cheap products like rice and beans. But in this community, with the informal situation and the legality, that is not possible. So they don't have that help.
Y a través de una iniciativa que le hemos puesto Red de Patio Solidario, hemos conectado cerca de 58 familias que tienen interés en producir alimentos saludables en la comunidad.
So we have created a network that brings 58 families that are interested in produce and grow their own food.
Pero ha sido una experiencia, yo creo que muy positiva para la comunidad, porque no solamente es intentar tener más acceso a los alimentos y también fomentar una alimentación saludable, ¿no? Una educación sobre la alimentación, sino esto, cómo integrar a través de la producción local de alimentos a personas vulnerables como las mujeres, las personas racializadas, las personas que tienen algún tipo de discapacidad.
It's not only about production, it's also about a healthy way of eat. And we are very happy because we can integrate our networking women's that it's one of the more vulnerable persons, women, and well, they are the head of this networking, of this network.
También tenemos un potencial, porque estamos hablando de una comunidad migrante. Muchas personas han venido del campo en busca de oportunidades en la ciudad, y hay muchos saberes en estas personas en cuanto a la agricultura, en cuanto a la agrobiodiversidad. Y, por ejemplo, es muy difícil en La Habana, en la zona céntrica, encontrarse, por ejemplo, guapén, que es una fruta muy típica del oriente del país, y en los pocitos hay de todo, desde el tostón a la habanera a la oriental, ¿no? Por ejemplo.
So one of the potentialities that we have find in this project or in this initiative is that we have valued the knowledge of the people who comes from other province or other part of the country. And in Los Pocitos, you can find a fruit which is called guapén that comes from the west, yeah, I think so. Del Oriente, yeah. The west from the country, and you can find it there, in Los Pocitos.
Y también proponer una visión de que cultivar también mejora el ambiente, el espacio de la ciudad, como también un lugar de encuentro social, ¿no? ¿Sí?
Okay.
Como un espacio también de encuentro de las personas, un espacio de arte, que tenga muchos beneficios, no solamente el alimento, ¿no? Sino también el uso de plantas medicinales, plantas religiosas, ornamentales. Por ejemplo, ahora tenemos un festival que se va a desarrollar del 15 al 20, que aquí tenemos a su coordinadora, donde tenemos diseñado una ruta, que es la Ruta Verde, donde se va a mostrar a la ciudad esta experiencia, pero también en el futuro se puede convertir en una ruta turística, una experiencia que puede valorizar estos espacios también con otros ingresos, ¿no? Para la familia.
A ver si me acuerdo. Well, we have one of the intention of the project is also to promote different knowledge with how to grow, not only a food, it's also how to use it in a healthy way, and with like plantas medicinales, sorry, I get in blank with the English, medicinal plants, because people knows about it a lot in the community. And other thing that the project has developed is La Ruta Verde, the green route that in our festival that we are going to have next week, we are started this, and it's a way to bring people from the city to know these gardens and these patios, and it's a way to create also tourism, local tourism in the community, because they are going to know in this route how people are doing their own local products and their food, and they are going to know how women are working in the patios and with the food.
Y esa concepción de la solidaridad es también no solamente una producción hacia lo interno de la familia, sino hacia la visión de comunidad. Por ejemplo, hay un ejemplo muy lindo que ahora se está extendiendo en la comunidad, que es la siembra de una variedad específica de habichuela que se llama bondadosa, que está produciendo por varios meses. Y entonces la hemos usado como cerca viva, como en la perimetral, y las personas afuera en la calle pueden abastecerse de habichuelas. Entonces todas las mañanas ves a los niños y a las familias recogiendo habichuelas de manera gratuita, y eso tiene doble sentido: compartir con la comunidad y también evitar el robo de las producciones de cada uno de los espacios. Y embellece también la comunidad.
Yes, so one of the main principles of this project is how to be more solidarity. It's not only the production of local food for the family, it's also for the community. And one of the recent experience that it's beautiful is that we are I don't know how to say habichuelas in English. Habichuelas, please. Well, they have growth. Well, it's a vegetable that it's green and has been inside habichuelas, and it has been grown in a yard and in a fence, and children go in the morning to pick it up and go in and bring it to their families. It's for the community, and you can pick it there. And we have videos of that. It's beautiful. And yes. And yeah, it's the double purpose of the project. Not only eat and be a production, it's also solidarity and how to think in the others and how to create our food, not only my food. I don't know. It's not only for the family who is growing that food. It's for the community. I think you get it.
De cultivando bienestar, ¿no? Como que al final es eso, bienestar,
It's
una cosa integral.
Well-being growing.
Okay, so Cristina, I think you have. Okay, I think you have a question.
Yes, I have a question. I guess it's for Fernando and Robertico. Someone from our listener from YouTube is asking, what is the spectrum of work that the professionals in urban design and architecture can realize after graduating in Cuba? And what are the processes of space planning? Are there competitions, or it's there are public like calls for the city?
So that's a really tricky question, because architecture as a private profession, it was forbidden in 1963. So architecture has only belonged to the state, and state as a centralized government focus on big projects, which I think it's good, but small projects have been left over. And but then there was let's say a big change in the approach of economy, and over 2011 the private economy started to emerge, and then a new client started to emerge, but there was a need and not someone who could solve that problem. And then there was a really unique and, let's say, interesting response of, okay, I'm an architect. I was graduated by the Faculty of Architecture. I can design, but I don't have a legal frame to do it. So you have all the legal restrictions, but at the same time, you have a client who's asking you to do that. So in my case, for example, I started my studio when I was in 5th year of school. And the thing is that if my title doesn't work, my experience is not important, and then the plans that I'm gonna do, they don't worth nothing in terms of legal. So it's really easy to have a private studio. And actually, there's no restrictions to do it. And also, of course, I'm talking from my point of view. Maybe the professors or other people can have a different approach, which can be really interesting. But basically, like architects as a private practice don't exist, then paradoxical, we have a great freedom in the way we approach design. Because we don't have like big urban, let's say, not urban, but architectural regulations. Also, the kind of the taxes are like really crazy. So there's you have to invent yourself, and you have to invent the profession itself. And I personally think that a condition like Cuba, there's a hyper-specific condition, should never be a justification or something bad. An opportunity to do something new. And in our case, in Infraestudio, we created a fiction. I mean, having a studio that no one recognizes is just a fiction. But when a fiction, like, for example, Jorge Luis Borges, or a lot of people have talked about it, or religion itself, like how fiction can really change reality in a sense. And in our case, it's been a really fragmental, really like from a really small scale. But then when you start to replicate these fictions, then you will have a city that it's basically changing, not in terms of legal terms, but in terms of physical terms, by the action of small architecture offices. And now we are having a dialogue with institutions because there should be a change of the work law, and then architecture should be implemented as a legal practice. But even though if it is not implemented as a legal practice in the new law, then architecture will happen in any way, so in informal way. And I think maybe it can be an interesting thing to understand architecture in a totally different approach. So, and also in our terms, I mean, in our office, we have been really related with literature and with contemporary visual arts. And we have expanded our practice to, for example, we created a, let's say, small editorial where we do books, handmade books related with music or whatever we like. And none of this is has a legal frame at all. It's just you have to invent yourself in this kind of, and then maybe there's some consequence. There's not. I mean, I don't know in that terms. Maybe we are kind of naive. But then talking about, I want to finish with the construction itself. So for you to kind of understand the situation of how to build in Cuba, we have a license for decorator for parties, which is the only license that can be understood as space. But also all our projects should be signed as an architect for the community, which is the architect licensed by the government to sign these plans. But also the construction, there are many things that you have to understand. And one is uncertainty. It's a fact that it's immense. And for example, in our case, we are not interested in designing complete buildings. We're just interested in design spatial strategies and also spatial concepts that can adapt to different conditions. And when I'm talking about that, you cannot predict what's going to happen in the market. And also scarcity is not related with having less material. It's also related that you don't know which materials you will going to have in the process of construction. So for example, we are not interested in materials. We're not interested in elements of architecture or structure. And so we can design a house in brick, and then we can turn it to reinforced concrete, or I mean, whatever. So we have a really precise obsessions related with let's say theory of architecture, but also spatial conditions of architecture. And then in all the other layers of construction, then you have to adapt. You have to have like open script, and from my point of view, good architecture can only survive this harsh condition by having a really strong introduction, a really strong first idea. Yeah, but I don't think if I responded in a good sense.
Thank you so much. You have responded in an amazing way. I like this idea of architecture as a practice of resistance.
So I have a last question to Roberto, and we finish the debate. Cristina, if you're okay with that. This question is from Cuba, and he said, assuming that the core of each society is the person, the habitant, how much do they educate these people to teach them to need, communicate, create, develop? I want to Roberto answer because he talked about that in his presentation. It's teniendo en cuenta la importancia de las personas, los habitantes de la ciudad, cuánto uno puede educar a estas personas en la idea de la necesidad de comunicar, crear y desarrollarse.
Yo creo que imagínate tú, eso es vital, y creo que hay una falta de educación cívica grande en Cuba con el tema. O sea, no sabemos participar, o sea, para nosotros participar es estar y no es realmente ser participar. Y eso lleva a trabajar de mi experiencia. Mi experiencia ha sido a partir de intentar detectar cuáles son las dinámicas de esos grupos humanos, y a partir de ahí intentar, o sea, poner un problema que yo a veces detecto como agente externo dentro de esa comunidad, y en realidad a partir de ese punto terminamos encontrando realmente cuál es el problema que hay. A partir de ahí, entre todos, o sea, de diferentes maneras la gente al final termina participando, ¿no? El que menos participa a veces es el que termina diciendo, o sea, es muy, pero bueno, es vital, ¿no?
So, in our case, we think that in Cuba we don't have a lot ideas of participate. Participate is not only be there; it's like how to be part of that. We have a civical conscience of that. In our case, we focus in the idea of understand what is the dynamic of this group of people, of this community, and in that context, we insert our topics that we want to discuss.
Esa parte también y corriendo un poco con lo que le preguntaban a Fernando también sobre la disciplina de diseñar. O sea, uno está preparado para, o sea, el diseño es una disciplina que se desarrolla a partir de un problema concreto, ¿no? Y como mismo tú puedes diseñar una mesa a partir de la necesidad de poner un plato en un lugar. Uno también termina diseñando o sea, políticas y grupos o sea, diseñando dinámicas de trabajo también. O sea, el diseño me ha servido mucho para eso, o sea.
This question connecting with that one that was answered Fernando, the idea that the designs respond to a specific problem. So you design a table with a specific condition, that also you can design and create a specific dynamic of this specific process. Design help me to create this kind of dynamic. So I think we finished with this answer. I want to give you the word to Chacon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cristina, for your amazing work today.
Thank you, Juan, and thank you, Cristina. Thank you very much. So we are closing this the second day from the first session. You don't hear me? Yes. So we are closing now, like the second day of the first session. Thank you again to all the institutions that have been made this possible. And also to all the speakers today, to Lorenzo, to Joiselen, to Fernando, Robertico, Michael, and Ana Laura. I want you to invite to participate in this process in the way you want. The platform cuba.inteligenciascolectivas.org will be available soon, very soon, and then is the possibility to participate through that, like in a lot of debates, like creating content and also moderating it. And I want you all to invite to the next session the second session that we are gonna have like some inputs, and it's gonna be the 12th of January and the 13th of January in the same time as these 2 days. So wait for all of you there. Thank you very much. Thank you, and see you there.
Thank you.